I grew up believing my father was the kind of man who would never break a promise. He was the anchor of our home, the sound of the key turning in the lock at 6 in the evening, the smell of coffee and newspaper on Sunday mornings. My mother, on the other hand, was the beating heart of everything, her easy laughter, her gentle touch, her embrace that could heal anything. For years, I believed the two of them were unbreakable. But what is unbreakable, if not something that hasn't been tested yet? I remember exactly the day the air in our house changed. The light seemed colder, the voices quieter. At night, the sound of silverware on plates felt like they were arguing with each other. And my father, who used to be presence, started turning into silence. He came home late, with excuses that had no holes but no soul either. Work. Meeting. Traffic. Words too safe for someone hiding inside them. I tried not to see it. Sometimes it's easier to protect love than to understand the truth. Until one evening, during dinner, he set down his fork and looked at my mother with a calm that felt rehearsed. "I need to tell you something," he said. "It's not your fault." Those 4 words always come before a storm. My mother let out a nervous laugh, the kind that tries to erase fear before it takes shape. "What is it now?" she asked. He took a deep breath. "I fell in love with someone else." The ticking of the clock became the only sound in the world. My mother didn't scream. She didn't cry. She didn't make a scene. She just stayed silent, and her silence was the loudest sound I've ever heard. I couldn't move. All I could think was, after 26 years, is this how love ends? If you're still listening, tell me in the comments where in the world you are. I like to imagine the places where these words find you. And if this story is touching something inside you, subscribe, so I know you're here with me. In the days that followed, the house felt like an echo of what it used to be. The big bed, the empty drawers, his scent still trapped in the towels. My mother kept cooking, not out of hunger, but out of habit. And I tried to understand. Who was this person that had walked into our world without knocking? She never asked his name. Maybe out of fear of hearing it. But he said it anyway. He said she was his soulmate. Soulmate. 2 beautiful words, spoken in such a cruel moment. For weeks, that phrase echoed inside me. I tried to imagine the face of that person. Someone younger? Older? A woman who smiled like my mother? Someone who listened to him in a way we had forgotten to? But what hurt me most wasn't the new love. It was his courage to give destruction such a beautiful name. Sometimes, what hurts most isn't betrayal, it's the poetry used to justify it. The following weeks felt like walking through a burning house in slow motion. Everything looked the same, but nothing meant the same anymore. His favorite dish stayed forgotten in the fridge. The coffee cup that always sat upside down in the cabinet now stayed open, waiting for an owner who wasn't coming back. My mother began talking to herself, softly, as if trying to negotiate with time. "How can someone change so much?" she would ask, without expecting an answer. And I, not knowing what to say, just watched. Sometimes, the love that stays weighs more than the love that leaves. One day, without warning, he came back. He smelled the same, looked the same, but something in him was different. It was as if his body had forgotten the way home. He sat at the table and said he wasn't there to ask for forgiveness, only to be heard. "I didn't want it to be this way," he began. "I fought against it for years. But there comes a point when you stop living to avoid hurting others, and start dying slowly instead." I wanted to shout. To tell him he had a choice, that he could have tried harder. But the words stayed trapped in my throat. He went on. "When I said I found my soulmate, it wasn't to diminish what I had with your mother. It was to say that, for the first time, I found a part of myself I never knew existed. It was the first time I saw him cry. And it was strange, because his pain felt real. After he left again, I spent nights awake, trying to understand what it meant to find a soulmate after 26 years of marriage. Does love change shape? Or do we change, and love simply follows? My mother started sewing at night. She said keeping her hands busy helped her quiet the mind. One evening, as she sewed in silence, she looked up at me and said, "I just wish he had told me sooner." It would have hurt the same, but it would have hurt honestly. And that thought stayed with me. Because maybe the truth always arrives late, but never without purpose. If you're still listening, tell me where you are in the world. I love imagining the streets, the accents, and the windows behind every listener. And if you've ever had to forgive something that didn't even have a name yet, stay with me until the end. The most important part is still to come. Time passed. He started sending short messages, trying to rebuild a bridge. Sometimes he'd send photos of places we used to go. Other times, just a few words, thinking of you. I replied little. I was afraid any word could become a bridge back, and I wasn't sure I was ready to cross it. Until one day, he asked me to meet for coffee. Said he needed to show me something. I went, not knowing why. Maybe because, even when hurt, love for our parents is a kind of gravity we can't escape. He seemed calm. Different, but calm. He told me he was happy. That the person he was with made him feel whole. That he could finally breathe without guilt. I wanted to ask the name, but he changed the subject before I could. He spoke of my mother with respect. Said she had been the most important love of his life, but not the last. And that realizing that had been the hardest part. Inside, I was torn. Part of me wanted to hug him, part of me wanted to never see him again. But his eyes, that tired, sincere look, disarmed me. As we left, he handed me an envelope. When you're ready, he said, read it. I kept that envelope in my drawer for days, afraid of what I'd find inside. Until one sleepless night, I opened it. Inside was a letter, and what he wrote changed everything I thought I knew about him, my mother, and love. But that part, I only discovered later. I opened the envelope. The handwriting was familiar, steady, careful. At first, I thought it was just another letter of regret. But it wasn't. I know I have no right to ask for your understanding, it read. But I hope that someday you'll see me not as the man who left, but as the man who finally found himself. I know it sounds selfish, but it was love. The kind of love that doesn't wait for the right moment, it just happens. And if you ever want to hear my story, I'll tell you everything. No more secrets. I read those lines over and over for hours. There was no name, no explanation, only those two words that echoed inside me, it was love. The following weeks moved slowly. Life went on, but that letter pulsed inside my drawer like a secret refusing to sleep. My mother spoke little. She looked exhausted, as if her questions had finally worn her down. Then one day, he called me. His voice was calm, but it carried a tremor that wasn't there before. Son, he said softly, can we meet? There's something important I need to tell you. We met at the same cafe as always. He looked different, lighter, more peaceful. This time, he seemed ready. Before you hear it from someone else, he began, I want to tell you myself. My heart started to race. I didn't leave your mother for another woman, he said. I never wanted to hurt her. I left, because I fell in love, but not in the way you think. I stayed silent. He took a deep breath, and with a trembling voice he said, I fell in love with a man. The words floated in the air, slowly, quietly. They weren't violent. They were human. And yet, the ground shifted beneath me. For a moment, I couldn't react. Time stopped. I looked at him and searched for the father I once knew. He was still there, only now somehow, whole. You're saying that? Yes, he interrupted gently. I fell in love with someone who understands me, who sees me. I fought it for years, out of fear, out of shame, out of love for you and your mother. But you can't live your whole life hiding from yourself. He paused. His eyes were filled with tears. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just hope you can understand. It was the first time I ever felt truly free. I sat there, trying to put the pieces together. The father who taught me about honesty. The faithful husband of 26 years. And now, the man confessing he had loved another man. It was like reading a book I thought I knew by heart, only to find entire chapters one had never seen before. Who is he? I asked. He hesitated, then smiled, a small quiet smile. filled with both guilt and tenderness. "Someone you've seen before," he said. "But that's not what matters now. What matters is that I finally stopped lying." And in that moment, the anger I had carried for so long began to mix with something else. A strange, unexpected respect. Because maybe courage is exactly that. Choosing truth, even when it costs you the love of those you love most. Days went by as I tried to process everything. My mother found out soon after. She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just said quietly, "He never stopped being who he was. He just took too long to allow himself to be." She started going for walks in the afternoons, listening to old songs. And little by little, the house filled again. With new smells, new colors, new light. It was like she was learning how to breathe again. One day, my father invited me to dinner. Said he wanted me to meet someone. I went, unsure, nervous but curious. When I arrived at the restaurant, he was already there. Across the table sat a tall man, calm eyes, a gentle smile. My father stood up and said, "This is Daniel." For a few seconds, the world went silent. Daniel extended his hand. "Nice to meet you," he said softly. "I've heard a lot about you." His voice was calm, unhurried, unafraid. My father placed his hand over Daniel's. A simple gesture that said without words, "This is real." I looked at them, and I saw something I hadn't seen in years: peace. I didn't understand everything at that moment. But I understood enough. True love doesn't need permission, only courage. That night, I left without saying much. On the way home, the wind blew through the open window and carried memories of childhood. The laughter, the trips, the Sunday mornings. And I realized, none of it had been a lie. My father had loved me. He had loved my mother. But one day, he discovered that love can change direction, without ceasing to be love. Months passed. My mother learned to laugh again. My father and Daniel moved to a small house in the countryside. Sometimes he calls me, asks if I'm eating well, if I'm happy, tells me about the garden, the books, the flowers they've planted. And he always ends the same way. "I love you, son." And I always answer, "I love you too, Dad." If you're listening right now, tell me where you are, which city, which country, which corner of the world. I love imagining the places where these stories find you. And if this story touched you, subscribe. So I know you're here. And that these words found shelter in someone out there. Today, years later, when someone asks me what happened to my parents, I smile. I tell them they were two people who loved the best way they could. Made mistakes as humans do. And in the end, chose truth. Because that's what I learned from them. That love isn't a straight line. It bends, it twists, it transforms. And sometimes, the soulmate who breaks what once seemed perfect is the same one who teaches you what's real. My father taught me that the worst lie is living a life that isn't yours. And my mother taught me that true love is letting someone go, even when your heart begs them to stay. Today, when I think of them, I don't feel anger. I feel pride. Because in the end, what remained was courage. Courage to be. To begin again. To love, truly. If this story made you feel something, empathy, nostalgia, or just the quiet wish to understand love a little better, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where in the world you're listening from. Stories like this remind me that love has many shapes, and all of them deserve to be told. And this was one more story that reminds me that the heart always finds its way home, even if it has to get lost first. We'll meet again in the next story. Until then, take care of yourself, and of the truths that live in your silence.